3.1 Sampling Techniques. So when conducting a survey, it's important to choose the right questions to be asked and to select the appropriate group to survey. Before a market research department designs a survey, the target group for the survey needs to be identified. So basically what they're looking for is who are we going to survey and why? Like, why are we surveying that group of people? So you're not going to survey people who like gymnastics for, I don't know, football equipment, okay? Once this group is identified, in many situations, it's not practice or possible to survey the entire population. So a representative sample of the population is selected. Okay, so let's review what a population and a sample is. Okay, so all individuals or items that belong to a group being studied. So what's important to know about population is all individuals, whereas a sample is just a group of individuals or items that are representative of the population. So what happens is, out of this entire population, we're going to choose a few people or a few items, and we will sample those. An example of this is if you're talking about the population of all of Canada, a sample might be individuals in Ontario. There are a variety of sampling techniques, and that's what we're going to go through, and each with its strengths and weaknesses. The choice of sampling technique depends on the population and the type of survey being conducted. Okay, it's usually impractical to survey every single member of a target group or population, so only a sample of the population is surveyed. Why do you think that this is considered to be impractical to survey an entire population? So when we're talking about surveying an entire population, if the population is just simply a classroom, so a classroom of 30 people, then this definitely can be done. But in the real world, many populations, so we say many populations, are too big. So they're too big to actually survey. And this will take a lot of time, so too much time. And also, it might cost too much money. Okay, so here are different sampling methods. So number one, simple random sample. Basically what this is just each member of the population has an equal chance or an equal opportunity, has an equal, let's just say chance of being surveyed. Okay, an example of this is putting numbers into a hat and selecting students randomly. So this is completely, everyone's just in a draw and you just select. Okay, the problem with this is it's not always we can say equal representation or like a fair representation of the population. Okay, so it's totally random. Number two, stratified random sample. Okay, the population is divided into, so or split up into subgroups. Okay, for example, gender, age, or nationality. And a random sample is selected selected from each subgroup in proportion to its size in the population. Proportion. Okay, so for example, if 16 students are boys and 8 are girls, so 16 and 8, then you can do like a quarter. If you want to sample a quarter of the population, you would do a quarter of the boys, which is 4, but a quarter of the girls is only actually 2. Okay, so you do it in proportion to each of the groups. Okay, number 3, voluntary response sample. The sample contains those members of the population who have chosen to respond to the survey. say members of the population who have chosen to respond to the survey. Okay, so like a comment card at maybe like a restaurant, you can choose whether or not to fill it out. If a phone call survey calls you, you can choose whether or not to hang up. Okay, number 4, cluster sample. So the population is divided into clusters, and a certain number of clusters are chosen. Okay, every member of these clusters is part of the sample. Every member. So this is a really, really important word right here. Every single member of that cluster is being interviewed or being surveyed. Is part of the. Okay, so they're grouped that each cluster is representative of the population. An example of this is if you want to see how McDonald's crew members like their jobs, you may sample every single member at a single McDonald's, but that's it. Just like maybe one in Hamilton, one in Toronto, one in Ottawa, and that's it. But every single member at that McDonald's, the McDonald's being the cluster. Okay, convenient sample. The sample contains those members of the population from which the data are most easily collected. So, if you want to survey people in school, you might stand outside of the cafeteria and just hand out surveys. Okay, systematic sampling. Every nth number of the population is selected. Okay, so when we say nth, this represents a number. So you can do every second member, every 8th member, every 12th member of the population is selected and sampled. So, for example, if the population is 24 people and you want to sample 6, then you would sample every 4th person. Okay, let's do some examples. A high school VP enters the cafeteria and randomly selects 2 tables. All students at these 2 tables are surveyed. So this one, the population is all students at the school. Okay, and the sample, well, they sampled 2 tables full of students. Okay, the type of sampling. So this here is a cluster sample. And we know that because the cafeteria is broken up into different tables, which are like groups of people. And then what the principal did, or the VP, was he took 2 tables and surveyed every single student. So it's cluster sampling. Okay, is there a bias? Yes. Okay, the bias here is that usually when people sit at the same table, they are friends. Friends oftentimes share common interests. So maybe at this table there is a basketball team, and at this table it's like the jazz band. Okay, so basketball team, jazz band, they may have the same opinions about something that the VP is surveying about. Okay, number 2. Students from Mr. Peters' math class are given a survey assignment. Haley goes home and surveys her immediate family only. Okay, the population were, it's just in general, just like people. Okay, because, and well, I'll put the real word. Okay, because it doesn't actually, the question doesn't actually give information about what the survey is about. Okay, and the type of sampling she did, I'm going to skip sample. The sample she took is her immediate family. We can say people Haley knows. So the sample was her immediate family. That's who she sampled. Okay, well, that was quite convenient. Okay, she went home. She's like, I don't convenient. Okay, I don't really feel like calling people. I don't feel like going on Facebook and asking people. I'm just gonna ask people around my kitchen table. Okay, and why is that bias? Bias because it's not representative of like everybody that Haley knows. Okay, it's only one family. Okay, and usually what families do is they have like the same opinions and the same foundation, the same attitudes and beliefs, so they may have the same opinion. Okay, so let's identify the sample and population in each situation. So the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario asks family doctors to give out surveys to every 10th person who visits them to ask whether patients are satisfied with the services provided by their family doctor. Okay, so the population are individuals who use the medical services. Okay, because they're only asking people if they're satisfied with these services. Okay, and they would have to show up at the doctor's in order to be actually surveyed. Okay, and the sample they took is every 10th person, and that's it, who visits, of course. So they're not actually calling every 10th person on their roster. They're just surveying every 10th person who visits. Okay, B. A fast food restaurant wants to know if customers would be interested in a healthy choices menu. Okay, so already we know that the population, it's probably going to be something along the lines of customers that eat at this fast food restaurant. Okay, they have a kiosk set up at the restaurant and offer customers a free combo meal if they are willing to fill out a 5-minute survey. Okay, so people who go to this restaurant, okay, customers of the restaurant. Let's say FF, fast food restaurant. Okay, and who is their sample? Anyone who fills out the survey. So that's pretty convenient. Anyone who fills out the survey. Okay, and C. Shauna wants to know if his or her fellow students plan to go to college after high school or if they plan to get a job. She surveys every student who takes English and asks them their plans. So population, fellow students. So Shauna's fellow students. Okay, that's everybody that Shauna goes to school with. And who did she sample? Everyone who takes English. Every student. So it's like a cluster, right? In English. Walk in English, survey every single student. Bean Emporium, the company that supplies food to the school cafeteria, is planning to change their menu, hoping that after their menu changes are in place, more students will buy their lunch from the cafeteria. They survey every 5th student who uses the cafeteria one day. What sampling technique was used? Okay, as soon as we see every 2nd student, 5th student, 10th student was sampled, we know automatically that that's systematic. That's systematic sampling. Okay, and we know because every 5th student was sampled. Every nth student was sampled. Okay, so the school principal points out to the company that there are more grade 9 and grade 10 students at the school than there are grade 11 and grade 12 students. The population of the school, according to the grade, is shown here. So the company decides to randomly sample 50 students from each grade. Okay, what sample technique was used? So when we talk about first, they're randomly sampling 50 students from each grade. I just want to point out that you may initially think that, oh, grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, these are clustered or it's stratified random sample, like it's these students are divided into to grades, and then 50 students are surveyed from each. However, the proportions would be off because 50 students out of 411 is much smaller than 50 students out of 209, right? So this is actually a combination of maybe like a cluster sample and a simple random sample. Okay, so I would say that this is simple random sampling, because what they would do is they would simply random sample each of the grades, but it would be under cluster sample. So they're not actually clustering under clusters or groups. Okay, so first they would divide it into groups and then they would just randomly choose 50 students from each group. I wouldn't say that this is cluster sample, because in a cluster sample, remember, every single student in that group must be surveyed. Okay, is this an appropriate technique? It could be, but no, not really, because it is not representative of the population. Okay, it's not representative of the population. Okay, because it's different proportions. Okay, he would be taking different proportions of each grade, and that's not fair. Okay, we want them to have the same weighting. Okay, so to be accurate, once the students are put into subgroups, a percent should be taken from each subgroup in proportion to the number of students in that grade. So 200 students in total will be surveyed. Okay, so in grade 9, there are 411 students, and if you actually add up 411 plus 352 plus 241 plus 209, and I'm just going to triple check this, I get 1213. So 411, 352, 241, 209. Yeah, 1213. So there's a total of 1,213 students. So grade 9 makes up 33.88% of the population. That means if we want to survey 200 students, we would multiply that by decimal 3388. So we would, I'm going to round up, we would survey 68 students. Okay, out of the grade 10s, okay, 352 students out of the 1213. So this is 29.02%. Okay, so out of 200 students, if we were to take 29% of the 200, it would be 58 students. Okay, and then continue. Grade 11, 12, 13, and grade 12. We're going to divide both of those. So basically what we're seeing, what percentage of the entire population are each of these groups. So this is a 19.87%, and 209 divided by 12, 13. This is 17.23%. Okay, and again, if you multiply the 200, so we want to know what 19.87% of 200 is. We want to know what 17.23% of 200 is. We get 34, that's rounded down, and then 200 times 0.1987, and then we'll round this up to 40. Okay, so we will survey 68 people in grade 9 58 people in grade 10, 40 people, and 34 people. If you add these numbers up, 68, 58, 40, and 34, you will get a total of your 200 people. Okay, so in total, 200 people will be surveyed.